Welcome to Blueprints for Liberty, Designing the Freedom Cities of Tomorrow. This is a podcast that explores the visionary concept of freedom cities and how we can create living environments that prioritize individual liberty, social harmony, and equal opportunities for all. We look back through history to see how the past informs the future and how people can self-organize in their communities to support self-sufficiency. We also look to develop leaders that are moral and ethical in a world that is spinning out of control. Tune in to be part of the conversation shaping the future of our communities. Well, welcome everyone. Today we have Nader Safinia with us, and I think we'll just jump right in. I'll let him give a little background as to who he is, how he kind of got to where he's at, and if he wants to share where his name came from, that would be interesting too. So go for it.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Nader Safinia. The name is Iranian. My family is Iranian. I actually I grew up all over the world. I was born in the U.S. Before I was 18, I lived in Indonesia, the UAE, and France. I've actually never been to Iran. So I've essentially dealt with an identity crisis my entire life. So I've felt like a foreigner everywhere that I've been, even here, even though I'm an American. And but I didn't grow up here. That said, much of my life has been influenced by American lifestyle, by American society, and so on. And the identity crisis that I sort of live in that colors my life is something I deal with every day. It's not in a negative way. It's not something that's, let's call it, dominating my life in the sense that I'm constantly going, I don't know who I am. But it certainly also colors my sensitivity to identity, my sensibilities to clear understanding of who we are, where we come from, why anyone should care, how we fit into the narrative of our own lives in addition to the collective, and so on. So what I do today is I'm known as the culture branding guy. I also am the founder of the company Black Ribbit, which is the culture branding agency. And culture branding is a niche that I've sort of carved out, and I say that with intent because it's a little bit different than what is normally addressed as cultural branding or culture branding, which is more centered around societal cultures and ethnic cultures and so on. This this endeavor is about company culture specifically, which is about creating a culture out of owning how people feel about you. So what that means is if a brand is defined as a gut feeling about a person, place, or thing, if you can if you can influence and sort of drive the narrative around how people feel about you through deliberate intent and deliberate actions that reflect who you are as an organization or as an individual, i.e., your values, in a way that's truthful, then you start to birth a culture, one that is truthful in nature, that also honors your values and the experiences you're trying to create. And that's something that can sort of permeate larger groups, communities, and ultimately society. And that's what I'm doing today.
Oh, that sounds interesting. And I'll just share a little bit about my evolution over time because I think it aligns, well, it aligns with what you're talking about, but mine's more on a personal level than a company culture. But it will, as I get to the very tail end here, it will dovetail into that. I also grew up only, instead of traveling around the world, I grew up all over the United States and experienced many different cultures. And I feel very blessed for that experience. I think it gave me a really broad perspective on things, which I truly value in my life. And I also think that was a part of shaping my identity. But my identity has evolved over the years. You know, most people don't care what were like as a kid or whatever. But uh, as a kid, I won't go into all the reasons why. I wanted to be a flight attendant. That was like my driving passion. And I was fortunate enough to be able to achieve that goal at one point in time. And I came at a time when it was the airlines were going through an evolution of their own, and it was extremely challenging. And I found out that maybe that wasn't what I really wanted to be. So I ended up going down the road of becoming a mother. And that wasn't really what I had planned. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't want to become a mother. It was just like I wasn't quite ready for that step in my life, but I took it anyway. And that, more than anything, helped me identify who I was and what I wanted. And what came out of that experience was I really liked educating people. I really liked the whole learning space. And as my kids got a little bit older and I moved into the corporate world, I helped organizations. I was an independent consultant and I helped organizations brand their learning and to make sure that their brand identity, that the learning that we created drove that brand identity. And that was so important. And I would go into an engagement and be like, okay, they just wanted me to sit down and create some of those really boring online learning modules that we've all taken, we all hate. And I'm like, oh, you know, I'm like, this isn't education. This isn't learning. This is just yeah, checking a box for compliance reasons. But nonetheless, there were some organizations that were a little more open to that. And I know in our conversations before we talked about, creating this culture that you're talking about, and mine was more along the lines of creating a culture of learning and how learning can drive everything we do within an organization. So I'll pass the baton back to you.
Um, yeah, that's interesting the way you describe that in its makeup, in its construct, because the reason I find it interesting is because the way that we, in my program, we design culture strategy. So first of all, and I believe you agree with this, we, a culture and a brand exist whether you want it to or not, want them to or not. Like that's number one.
Mhm.
It's whether, how you influence it to mold it into what is preferable that matters. This is why, like, we talk about, we identify ourselves as strategists or designers, brand strategists or designers, because we're creating parameters through which, action is manifested into experience that ultimately create the brand, which i.e. is the way someone feels about you, or the culture, which is, i.e., the way what people value and what people react to. So, or how people show up. And that's what's interesting. This constantly gets lost in translation. So whenever people say things like, I created this brand, I always say, actually, the audience created the brand. You created the parameters through which experiences were had that manifested as the brand. So it's tricky to wrap your head around, but that's an important distinction. And so in our case, when you talk about creating a culture of learning, um, in our case, we what I always go at a challenge through the lens of what is this place doing really well already? Like what are your strengths? What stands out? How are you different? Because at the end of the day, there are so many similarities between people, places, and things, and it's the more saturated and let's call it merged the world gets, the less quote differences there are. It's like how many different kinds of this thing can there possibly be? I mean, one of the best examples is like real estate companies. Like how many of them, how different can you possibly be with each other, right? And And when you look at it like functionally, you're like, well, not much. It's practically the same here and there and here and there. So you start digging into what are like the core value differences? What are emotional differences? What are um, the discrepancies then lie in character, in personality, and so on. And you can associate that with an entire organization as well, the same way you would an individual. So if through that discovery, through that exploration, we find that this place is rooted in a value of learning and education and so on, then we emphasize that to be the case. Otherwise, as far as the identity of learning goes, learning, I think, is somehow always embedded in the outcome because it's the root of growth. You can't really grow without learning anything. So it's somehow baked in always, but as far as an emphasis, it might not be emphasized because that's not what said organization is trying to quote sell.
Exactly. And in my many years of, being an independent learning consultant, that was something I really struggled at times to help people understand was, yes, we're creating this learning for compliance reasons. Yes, we can check that box. Great. But one of the examples that I give people is I worked for a large membership organization of electrical cooperatives. And one of the things they needed to do was create a learning about sexual harassment, right?
Hmm.
All big companies have sexual harassment training. That's just required by law nowadays. So one of the first questions I'd ask people is when I'd go in would be like, do you have a problem with sexual harassment or were we just checking a box here, right? And they always are like, oh no, we don't have a problem because they legally we're not going to open up that can of worms, right?
Yeah.
But in my conversations with them, I discovered that it was not at all uncommon for some of the linemen who out, the guys that are out working on the power lines to come into the office and speak to the customer service reps in there like, hey, honey, how's it going today?
Hmm.
Oh, you know, to some people, that's no big deal.
I know.
To other
Others,
people,
it's a huge red flag.
exactly. And so I convinced them, I wouldn't say you have a problem, but there are people who think that they're being spoken to in a way that's disrespectful to them and in a way that they term sexual. And so it totally changed the way we approach the learning, and it totally changed the culture. It totally changed,
Yeah.
these linemen honestly didn't think they thought they were being nice. They thought they were
Yep.
being polite. And these, young women who worked, as customer service reps at the front desk, were just mortified. So, just helping people understand. And that in turn then manifested itself to the customer service, as customer service
Yeah.
rep to the customers and how they related to people. Not that they related to them in an quote inappropriate way, I guess, but more it's like, okay, I understand that how I speak to people has an impact.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's that is the root. It's like that's an epitome and a perfect example of uh just ingrained beliefs and personalities with no malintent. And it's 100% perception, and perception is reality. So I'm gonna so okay, it's amazing how many times this skit has come up in the last few months. So there was I don't know if you used to watch this. I don't even know if they still make their shorts, but Key and Peele, the comedy duo, um, they uh, they used to make all these like comedic sketches, little shorts. And one of them was it's so appropriate and suits most of my conversations because it's about communication and perception. And it's the show is the little skit is about two friends texting one another. And one of them is super laid back and the other one is really defensive. And they're deliberately reading the texts out loud. And one of them is reading it all like chill and laid back. Like, no, there's no problem. And the other one keeps getting defensive so he's reading it in the tone of like attack and defense, and he keeps reading it as just camaraderie. And so there's this major miscommunication between them, and they arrive, and one of them's ready to hang out and have a beer, and the other one's about to he has a bat wrapped in barbed wire, like we're literally ready to attack the guy. And he's like, what's with the bat? And then he goes, I knew you, I brought it for you. And he goes, oh, for my post-apocalyptic zombie costume. and, like, and so I use this analogy all the time because I go, perception is everything. You can't, I mean, not that you can't, but when you take when you decipher things in your own way through your own lens and your own sensitivities and your own upbringing and your own whatever, all the things,
Hmm.
then you may misinterpret the message, and the intent behind the message completely. And we have what is it? Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. Like I use that example all the time. Like, where is the message coming from? How is it delivered? The tone in which it's delivered, the face through which it's delivered, and
Hmm.
so on. How someone looks, our preconceived notions, pet prejudices, and otherwise always kick into gear. If you're unable to just take a beat and have either a conversation about it or literally say, there's nothing wrong here. Certainly there are many women who don't take offense to that kind of language because they're either used to it or they know there's no malintent. And then there's the other side. Or there are men who take offense to other men speaking like that to women. It's interesting and I find it fascinating. Moreover, when we design our programs, that's how deep we go. We go so deep that the resulting power tool that comes out of the strategies that we create, because we're doing it in a unique way. We're designing the customer brand, which is traditional. Why would anyone want to buy from said organization? But we're also designing the employer brand at the
Hmm.
same time. Why would anyone want to work here? And the building these together as a dual strategy approach is very powerful because now you're creating a literal bridge between the two sides so that there's this very cohesive communication strategy and framework between what the company says and what the company does and how people view the company from the outside and how they view it from the inside and how they experience it from both sides. And when we go that deep, now we're talking about, okay, the power tool that comes out of this dual strategy is what I call the culture brand statement. And that basically says we do everything we do because we value X, Y, and Z, and we want people to experience A, B, and C. So those two together is your culture and your branding. It's how you carry yourself, your values, what your belief system is, and so on, the foundation of that. And then how you want people to feel, which is your branding and what you want them to experience. Through that lens, all of these things that you're describing start manifesting. How do you talk to people? Why do you talk to them like that? Because you value this and you want them to experience this. Why did we buy these pens for the office? Why are our hiring, firing policies like this? Because we value this and we want people to experience this, whether they're a customer or an employee.
Exactly. And the way that employees internalize the message is the way that they will convey it to the
Yeah.
customer. And yeah, it's so interesting because I just find that people don't realize that I'm rebranding myself here, getting out of the, I wouldn't say totally, I'd still do some independent contracting work, but I've switched gears and am providing just learning programs that I've created myself and want to give to the public. So instead of business to business, now I'm more business to consumer kind of thing. And I am
Hmm.
just totally shocked as I go through, and I've been doing this for like 3 years now, trying to define myself, this identity crisis kind of thing, idea that we've talked about. And I'll come up with a message that I think is just awesome. And I think this conveys who I am. This is what I want to convey. And I'll put it out there. And the feedback I get is like, I'm like, that wasn't what I meant. That's not at all. Where did you get that idea from? This is insane. That's not what I meant. And so, I've worked with some marketing experts and everything, and I haven't been able to pin down exactly how to say what I want to say in a way that attracts the kind of people that I
Yeah.
feel will, be in alignment with what I have to offer. And this isn't easy.
Yeah. Messaging 101. It's just, yeah, it's this is that's exactly why the rule of thumb, first of all, it's always hard when you're doing it for yourself. Something happens like in your brain. It's the weirdest thing. The whole cobbler's shoe proverb comes to life, and you're like, why is this a thing? Every single time I'm trying to do it for myself, I suck at it. I feel like an amateur. But then when I do it for everyone else, and my team is kicking ass and we're all kicking ass and we're like, but when we flip the script, it's like, come on. um it's this thing. It's just a very interesting thing that happens. It's a block. That said, it also reinforces why um simplicity is king always. The more the whole, the rule I always make, it's one of the top rules in when I talk about communication strategy and just communication in general, when you're speaking to people face to face at the personal level. Be deliberate in what you're trying to say. Don't leave room for interpretation. Just say what you're trying to say. If you want to be poetic and recite sonnets, time and place, but otherwise just say what you're trying to say. When the internet first went public, like not even first, like I would say maybe 10 years into it, around 2005. Remember when suddenly people got really creative with URLs, like URLs. You were like, nobody is, first of all, no one's ever going to say that out loud, like ever. And then, second, that's a nightmare for SEO. You're going to have to put a typo in your SEO so that when people search for the actual spelling of this word, the SEO goes, did you mean this other thing?
Where's
Just so that your website shows up. And we used to say to those people as designers and strategists, we'd be like, don't make your URL, don't make it fancy. Just don't make it fancy. It's too complicated. Like my own name, I used to, my website was Nader Safina. And I'm like, who's going to spell that right? Nobody's going to spell that right. And Black Ribbit is an interesting one because Black Ribbit is actually easy to spell, but it's uh, it's not a word. It's not. It's an abstract term.
Mhm.
That said, when people hear it, 9 out of 10 times, because ribbit can be spelled differently, but 9 out of 10 times they'll spell it correctly, and they'll be able to write the URL in different languages, and it still works. And it's weird and unusual, so people remember it. But Nader Safina, they'll remember the name, but they'll never be able to spell
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, let me give you, I think this is another classic example from my own personal experience here. And so after many years of trying to figure this out, because I'm creating these leadership programs. Well, leadership in and of itself, automatically, when you say leadership, what do you think of?
C-suite.
Exactly. The managers, the CEOs. Okay. Now let's take it a step further. My little tagline is leading when you're not the leader.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So now what do you think of?
I think of leadership mindset. I think of like how to instill a leadership mindset so that those who are not in quote positions of power can still lead either their own lives or have positive influence, constructive influence on those around them
Oh,
to help them basically to influence others, not necessarily to follow them, but to feel empowered to also be leaders.
well, yeah, okay. So, man, see, I must have landed on the right one because you just explained exactly what I've, been trying to do. But it's funny. I was
I'm also an expert.
I know. So I'm like, okay, you just you just sold my whole program. But anyway, so I'm on this discussion board and I bring up something about, hey, I'm offering this program, leading when you're not the leader. And all of a sudden somebody comes back just, like they were just they hadn't even finished reading what I'd written and was responding. And they're like, okay, so do you think leaders are made or are they born?
Hmm.
And I was like, I think you're missing what I'm saying. And I mean, we went through several different, back and forths, and I never could because that person came into it with an agenda. Their idea was they were thinking about leadership, especially in a military structure where, when you're not the leader, you don't lead.
Yeah, sure.
All chain
Yeah.
of command, right? So they come at it from that perspective, and every response, everything was written through that lens. And I'm like, no, this is a more esoteric idea. This is like, okay, if I work in it, because after all my years of consulting, the one thing I found is that people feel powerless when they are in an environment where they aren't able to speak up or, everything has to be done the way the boss wants and,
Yeah.
just the whole thing. They just feel powerless. So I'm like, how can you change that paradigm so that you can come into an organization and influence, not change, not
Yeah.
command, not control what's going on, but just be that subtle influence that, brings that about. And we went back and forth. And finally, I mean, it was after 2 days of going back and forth with I don't know how many iterations. He's finally like, oh, so you're not talking about people who are in charge. I was like, I must have said that like 30 times.
Yeah, a lateral subject is entrepreneurial mindset.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and those are actually not the same thing.
Mm-mm.
Uh, because you can be a leader and not an entrepreneur. And you can also be an entrepreneur and not really be a leader. Because you can many entrepreneurs, that's why they hire, like they'll hire executives, they'll hire a CEO, they'll hire someone to come and lead their organization, their company. They might be a technical person, a technical personality who's more operational. Not that operations people can't be leaders either, but like they're more in the technical side, they're more in the weeds, they're not really extroverted, they're not like,
Hmm.
they're not in a way that is influential. They're very smart, they're very intelligent, they're very good at what they do. People trust them, they respect them, but they can't rally. And that's why when an organization gets to a certain level, they're like, okay, we need, a coach will be the first one to be like, you need to bring in a CEO, like you need to bring in someone who can take this to the next chapter and so on. And I find that interesting too, because in organizations, many leaders, um, maybe managers is a better term in this context, but uh, executives are resistant to the entrepreneurial mindset in terms of hiring people
Hmm.
because they ruffle feathers.
Yeah.
Leaders might not ruffle feathers. This is why this is such an interesting dynamic because entrepreneurial mindset is all business. They're thinking about how the business can grow. How can the business change through innovation, through optimization, through whatever. And leadership or managers or executives are resistant to that because they're like, we don't want people to come here and change our ways. We just want people to come here and do what we say. and and I'm very much against that personally. I don't like that resistance mindset because entrepreneurial mindsets, if you can instill that kind of autonomy in your teams, then you're going to blow up. Like you're going to have, it doesn't matter how big or small your company is. That's where the magic starts happening because people feel they feel ownership. They feel they have the guts to suddenly go forward, not to mention that's when you can start actually managing those personality types because they're very hard to manage.
Yes.
And if you work, and if you work with them in a collaborative manner, then they feel bought in and they're like, okay, I have room to kind of move here and do the things. And now it's a give and take because they won't feel rebellious. Like, oh, you said I can't do that. Okay, let me show
Show
you.
you
And
I can.
yeah, exactly. And instead now you can grow together. It's the same thing with creative mindsets. Managing creative, you know this as well as I do. There are like volumes of books on how to manage creatives because creatives are rebellious. They don't like authority. They're artist types. So they're up in the ethos, in the ether, I mean, and they're whimsical and dreamers and so on. And they're very egocentric. They have big egos. They don't like to hear the word no. And if you manage them or lead them through a like a reprimanding style, they'll just bail on you. They'll literally leave. They'll be like, I don't care if the ship sinks, I'm out of
I know.
here.
Hey, I'm on the Titanic, but I'm going to catch one of those lifeboats. I'm out of here.
Exactly. But if you work with them in a collaborative manner, obviously everyone has a limit. There is a limit to everything. Like if it's constant contention, that's a different story. But if you can work with them in a collaborative manner, I see you and, yes, and how about this? I saw that very good and then get to a place where you're collaborative, then, you can soar. But these are things that either take a lot of training or just a lot of observation.
Yeah. And so back to training slash learning, but also back to brand strategy. So if you're in an organization and you have these different, mindsets. And I totally agree. To me, the entrepreneur is typically the idea person, and the
Hmm.
COO is the one that says, "Okay, here's how we're going to make it work." The
Yep.
entrepreneur's like, "I don't care how it works, just make it work." The CEO is like, "Okay, now I'm going to oversee. We're going to get a CFO over here, somebody to manage the budget." You know,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So you get all these different mindsets and you get these different people that play different roles, and how do they interact with each other with all of them still buying into the same idea that, I mean, if the entrepreneur's the one that started it, has the money, it was their idea, you kind of have to defer to them a lot at the beginning. But then you need your marketing people, you need your branding strategists to come in here and say, okay, if you really want this to work and you really want it to be, sell and make money, here you've got to, you've kind of got to go that route. But in the process of teaching them how to interact with each other, respect each other, get buy-in from each other, you're also teaching them how to do that with your customers. Because in
Yeah.
in the world we live in today, I was really disappointed a few years ago, taking a marketing class because it was, and it was your typical marketing class, problem solution. What problem does your customer have? How can you provide a solution? And I'm like, that's all well and good. But in the world we live in today, there's a million people who can solve my problem. And where am I going to? And if I don't like the way you do it, I'm just going to go to another person. I don't like the way you do it. I'm going to go. I mean, it's just everywhere. So to get people to be loyal to you and to get people to stay on board with you, you have to get buy-in. You have to treat
Yeah.
them like your entrepreneur, your creative. You've got to build these relationships.
Yeah.
And that all comes back to okay, here's our brand strategy. Here's how we talk to each other within the organization because this is what we want to accomplish and how we want to communicate it. Now we need to take that same strategy and apply it to our customers. Would you say that's accurate?
100%. And I really appreciate the way that you articulated that because even in our program, like what I'm all right, so in 2021, like the way that all of this sort of came to be, my culture branding program sort of manifested was COVID happened. So in All right, let me go back a bit. I launched the company in 2018. NS Design. Very boring, stuffy, old name, very easily forgetful, very forgettable. And I had the name Black Ribbit in my back pocket. The way I came up with that was serendipitous. It just kind of came to me in a vision, which itself was a cool incident. And then I rebranded as Black Ribbit in the fall of 19, and I specifically targeted hospitality. And so 5 months later, that entire industry shut down. And so it was just really bad timing, like
Mm-hmm.
really bad timing, wrong place, wrong time. And to add to, insult to injury on top of just bad timing for the market, granted, it was detrimental to so many people. But for me, it was just not only was it bad timing from a market perspective, it was bad timing from an entry perspective because I had no experience in this space anyway. And so, like, while I had 15 years of experience in design management and brand strategy and communications and so on, hospitality was never a focal point. So I was totally new. I was wet behind the ears. So no one, even though I knew what I was doing because I know how to apply design thinking principles universally and so on. And that's how it works. I don't have to be an expert in hospitality to do a good job there and to do a stellar job there. Because just like math, I understand the formula, I understand the foundation. I don't need to know, you know, like just how to use the formula. I need to know like why it exists and what the foundation is and its purpose. So anyway, um, 2020 was okay. 21, my business tanked, and I came to Houston because I needed help. I hit up my parents; they live in Houston, so I came here, and I started applying to jobs like many people. At the same time, 21 was the year of the Great Resignation, and millions of people willingly left their jobs, and the remote hybrid model was creating problems and offered solutions and problems at the same time. People meaning companies and individuals, especially older generations, Gen X and and boomers, young boomers had no like it was an alien concept for them. For Gen Y and Gen Z hadn't really entered the workforce yet, but like younger Gen Y and older Gen Y, it was almost a natural transition going into remote work. But it also created all this contention within the employee employer relationship and all these archaic models which you yourself are very familiar with just came to the surface, literally like just bubbled up. And now everyone's talking about, the broken system. And so, and then add to the fact that COVID emphasized self-care, which was a great thing that came out of it. The Vatican got behind it. So, mental wellness became a global focal point as well. And we Americans, as always, pushed that concept off the edge of a cliff and turned it into selfish care. And so now it became all about me, me,
Yeah,
me, me. You
yeah,
have to do all these things for me and
yes.
my well being. And the collective was lost. So it was like, what about us? Like, you're just completely leaving us in the lurch here and literally just bailing. So at the same time, I had to find work because my business tanked. I had no money. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I started applying to jobs. I applied to 460 jobs in 6 months. I got 60 denial letters. I got one interview. I have a master's degree. I have a bachelor's degree. I have 15 years of experience in the field. I am intercultural. I speak three languages and dabble in two more. I mean, it was like, if I can't get more than one interview, what the hell is going on out here? And meanwhile, that interview that I got, I made it to the hiring round, and then the job was eliminated. So they were just like, "Sorry, the job's no longer available." And then I got 400 ghosts. So, and to top it off, all these recruiters and coaches were like, "Your resume is amazing. It's it's so good." I'm like, "Clearly, it's not. I don't understand. I'm
Hmm.
getting zero feedback. You know, as a
Right?
human, feedback is useful. As a designer, it's my oxygen. As
Yes,
I can do
yes.
nothing without it, right? And the so now I'm just digging. I'm like, what is going on here? I don't understand. Like, what is this? There's like a break here, and more people were coming out with the same story, and I started realizing that basically, to your point, the market is not getting what the market sees. Like, the first place, I realized that traditional branding and sales and marketing and everything is focused so heavily on the customer experience that they basically neglect the employee experience, even leadership. And and then you have coaches and recruiting and HR and so on focused on the employee experience, and these two never talk. So there's this great disconnect between the employee employer relationship and the employee and customer relationship. Moreover, not only, and the first place you notice this disconnect is in the job application process. And job descriptions are not written with the candidate in mind.
No.
They're written as project briefs, as if they're talking to equipment
Yes.
and not to people and not to humans. And then, moreover, I say the reason that they treat customers so well is because they see dollar signs there and
Hmm.
they see dollar disappearing on the
The other
inside.
side, yeah.
And so they're like, the irony is that no one's treated like a human.
And
They're treated like cash cows, and they're treated
like
they're
disappearing
treated
dollars.
yeah. So there's this experience of like, customers feel seen because they're being tended to and
Yeah.
catered to and so on, because they want them to spend money, but then employees are expendable and dispensable, and so the experiences are completely mixed up, and the inside is different from the outside and so on. And so, again, to your point, what really stood out to me was that. And that's why I've instilled a design thinking model into my culture branding program and brand strategy now culture brand strategy program, because it's inside out and it's employee and customer facing. It's a human centered, people first design model that starts with empathy, which is what design thinking is. It's
Yes.
the word written out. Literally, first step is empathy.
Yes.
That's the word. It's not another word. It's
Yeah.
empathy.
Yeah.
So, seeking to understand,
Yes.
where these people are coming from. What is their story? What is their motivation? Why would they even want to be here?
Hmm.
Like, truly getting at the root of that. And that changes everything.
And it changes every day.
Yeah. It changes every day.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges I've had recently. Um, I mean, I wasn't quite ready to, quit, my independent consulting career. But because of COVID, I was in the same position. I mean, as an independent consultant, I apply for jobs all the time. That's just what I do every day, all day. I just build that into my budget. It's just what you do. And I was so good at it for so long, and my resume was stellar. I have 20 years of experience getting jobs and
Yeah.
and being highly successful at getting jobs. I would say out of every 5 jobs I applied for, I would get 3, 4 of them, you know?
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
yeah, Well, it's easier to hire an independent contractor than it is an employee.
Sure. Yeah.
It's,
Still.
yeah, I mean, you can be on the job 2 days and they're like, you have green eyes.
Yeah.
I thought I hired somebody with blue eyes. See you later. So there's, good and bad to that. But after COVID, I now I'm like you. I'd applied and applied and applied, and I'm not even getting interviews. And if I get interviews, it's amazing that, and then my experience was totally like yours. And so finally, I'm like, I'm getting to a stage in my life where I really am tired of creating learning for other people because for the most part, they don't really want the kind of learning that I feel is valuable, right? So I'm just going to start creating my own courses. And it has been an absolute challenge in so many ways because, okay, and I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Okay.
Yeah.
That's just my nature. That's who I am. I've been called a maverick, an entrepreneur, a pain in the ass, all of the above, right? So, I have that entrepreneurial spirit. Really into all of that. And because of that entrepreneurial spirit, and because I'm a maverick and I like to be out there and kind of being ahead of the curve and doing things like that, I've done work for a lot of Fortune 500, 100 companies and the federal government. They are not into let's, be forward thinking and leading the way. It's like, no, what's working? Let's make sure we're doing what's working. So I got tired of that, but now I'm just stuck in this other, you know, paradigm where I'm like, okay, I know what I've created is really good because after all these years of creating learning, I know what works. I know but how do I get my message out there? How do I, get people to talk to me? And then I get them to talk to me. And, it's like instead of applying for jobs, every single person I talk to is a job. It's like they're not customers, they're like a job. I have to interview them, they're interviewing me. And this kind of goes back to your brand strategy idea. Is what I have to offer and is who I am the kind of person that you're looking for? And are
Yeah.
you the right customer for me? Because I have found I can get a lot of customers, but keeping them is a different story because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, that wasn't what I thought it was. This leading when you're not the leader was not at all what I thought it was. So I'm like, I'm not wasting my time with a bunch of people who don't really want what I have to
Yeah.
offer. So it's
Yeah.
this whole thing. And, it goes back to this brand strategy. It's like, I need to know, even though I don't have a bunch of employees and all that, it's just me. I need to know what my product, what my services are, how do I deliver it, how do I communicate it from a marketing and a branding perspective, but also how do I interact with the people that I'm trying to
Yeah.
engage with and keep them. It's because, man,
Yeah.
once you get a customer, there's a lot. People don't realize. I get really frustrated. One of the things in all my years of being an entrepreneur kind of thing is listening to people say, I could have made that for 10 cents and you're charging a dollar. I'm like, you have no idea all the money that went in. It wasn't just this little, like, perfect example. I have this little tiny dog and she's older and we have hardwood floors and she just struggles to walk as she gets older and her feet slip. So my husband found these little tiny rubber things that we put on her toenails, right? So she can walk on the floor. Granted, they probably the whole, I think there's 20 in a package or something, probably cost 5 cents,
Yeah.
but they cost $40. And my
Yeah.
husband's like, I'm not paying $40 for something that costs 5 cents. And I'm like, no, look at the packaging, look at the market,
Yeah.
all the stuff that goes into it and all the employees that it costs to make these things and everything. And I'm just like, people don't realize everything that goes into something.
Yeah. That's right. That's why pricing wars are the quickest way to the bottom. Price wars are like you don't you if your entire value is based on price, then you're not really selling anything of value. You're commoditizing whatever you're doing. Not to mention, to your point, this is this is a common argument in the creative field because creatives are notoriously bad at pricing themselves. You know, and I say they because I crossed the threshold because I'm a creative. Like I
Yes.
come from that. My background is in fine art,
Mhm.
and my art is now culture branding. You know, that's my heart. My heart is in that, and it actually appeases the artist in me because I'm doing something through the lens of activism, but it's silent activism and so on. So, um, but the point is that you know, we have been trained as designers, as creative professionals to sign our names on the back of our work. You know, like as long as the thing functions, you're doing your job. And like, don't, you know, we love what we do, so there's no price on it, and like things like that. And it's like, forget about the fact that like we need to make a living, but no, you got to perpetuate the suffering artist so that your work is always as good and so on. And you have something to complain about because your heart and soul go into the work. And then you go, hey, you remember that you're doing this for someone else, right? Like they're paying you to do this, right? Like your heart and soul is not going into this. Like you can put as much passion into it as you want, and more power to you for doing it because you'll create better work. But remember to separate yourself
Oh,
because this is going out into a functional world. And this is not just to hang on somebody's wall and whatever. And even then, you know, paying for art is completely subjective.
oh yes.
I mean, this is why I'll never forget like the Banksy one where he shredded his own work at the auction.
Mhm.
And do you know that one, that story?
Mhm.
You know who Banksy is? Do you know who Banksy is? Yeah. So there was that famous auction where I think it was the girl with the red balloon and canvas framed, and then like as soon as they closed the bid, it was like a remote thing where a shredder just went through it. Like the frame was built, it was built into the frame, and it shredded the piece of art in real time, and it was filmed and everything because they
Oh,
had a camera in there, and
oh,
it literally doubled the value right
you
there because suddenly everyone was like, "Oh my God, is this?" Like they added all this
teasing.
interpretation and symbolism to it, and so on. And so yeah, the notion that we say it costs what it costs because it's 20 years of experience, it's 20 years of learning and failing, it's 2 degrees and money, sweat, blood, and tears, so that I could do this for you in 5 minutes as opposed to 5 months. You know, you think that just happens? Like my brain is trained to think in a way that thinks conceptually, creatively, abstractly, and then concretely in a matter of milliseconds. And I'm faster than the machine because of that.
Yeah.
And I beat AI constantly when it comes to that stuff, and I test myself. And the I learned a valuable lesson when I was a junior from my creative director, who was my greatest mentor. And it was in the beginning. I think it was like second year in. I was still a junior, you know, either mid level or junior. And he gave me a he put me as lead on on a bigger project. He saw I was doing better and so on. He's like, "You want to take this?" I said, "Yeah." And I think we had 10 days or 2 weeks to turn it around. And I was kind of sitting there, the artist in me, like waiting to get inspired. You know,
Yes, I know.
I need the spark, you know. I'm not inspired. And then he'd come to me and he was seriously my best mentor, just very strong in his leadership style. And he was like, "So how you doing on that project?" And I was like, "It's like maybe 5 days in." I go, "I'm still thinking." He's like, "Okay, well, you know, deadline's in like 4 days, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, it'll be fine." He's like, "Okay." And then he comes back like, you know, he let me be. And he comes back like 3 days later, like, "So where are you at? This thing is due tomorrow." And he's like, and I go, "I don't know. I'm still, I'm still thinking, I'm waiting." And then he goes, "You know what? We don't have the luxury of waiting for inspiration to strike. Figure it out. Get inspired right now." He's
Yeah.
like, I don't care how you do it, just do it now. He's like, we're in the age of the internet. Excuse my language, fucking Google image
Yeah.
it or whatever. Like go
Yeah.
online and figure it out. Take a walk. Go
Yeah.
look around. I really don't care how you do it. Just
Mhm.
get inspired now. And I was like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
And then, and then, and then I mean, it worked. Like I
Yeah.
totally was like, I kicked me into gear. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, okay. Read the brief again and look at stuff and then figure it out.
Out.
I really don't care how you do it. And then I did it and it was fine. And of course, he guided me through it and all that. But like, it was fine. And I live with that every day. And that's how I train designers as well. I'm like, you train yourself to get inspired by words, by imagery, by, tone, by whatever, just everything around you. That's why you have to, as a designer, if you want to be a strong designer, it's
Mhm.
not just about graphics or, aesthetics here or fashion there or whatever. It's literally the entire man-made world is a product of design. And so you have to pay attention to pop culture, to, the different generations, language styles, rhetoric, listen, like look at politics, look at intercultural relations, look at like how the world exists. What is red in the East versus the West? What does this word mean in different languages? Is it offensive in that language? Is it meaningful in this one? Just like it's literally everything,
Mhm.
and just constantly be open to everything. How does the automotive industry work? How does the oil industry work? How does the art industry work? How does fashion work? Fashion models are constantly adopted in economics. I mean, like, how do you, apply everything to everything? Because that is life. It's the interconnectedness of all things, people, places, and things. That's design. And so if you can, if you train yourself to think that way, then you become innovative, then you become fast, then you become inspiration on two legs, and you're constantly like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, this, I can do this with this, I can do that with that. And then you look at the world through my lens and my experiences, and all the heartbreak and betrayal and camaraderie and accolades and praise I've experienced throughout my life. You reach a point where you go, I can see human harmony. I want the world to be harmonious, and I can see that happening through the workplace because it's a microcosm for societal structure. So, your vision becomes, I want to make humanity harmonious by lifting our spirit, our relationship with the workplace. And you invent culture branding. It's just, it's just like figure it out, get inspired now, raise your prices, and go
Yeah.
to town.
What you do. And it's interesting because I think about that because part of being an instructional designer is part design. That's why we're called designers. And the other part is writing instructions, which is technical, right? So you've got
Yeah.
these two worlds that have to come together. And so it's I've lived in this both worlds for quite a while. And as you were telling, that of those experiences, the first thing that came to my mind is, okay, so how do you, and this is something I really struggled with for a long time, and I got better at it toward the end, but I still can, give me another 30 years and maybe I would have figured it out, is take all that you just said and package it and sell it and have somebody, brand it, market it, sell it so that you don't have to say all that because that's just people will, I don't want to hear all that. But yet they know the value because they understand everything that you just said. And I think
Yeah.
that to me is in essence what you do. You take all that stuff and you make it palatable and make it appealing and you to people who say, okay, I see the value in what you're offering. I see that you're the kind of person who can see through all these different lenses and bring that whole package because that's what I really need today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That resonates because that is what it is. And it's such a trip to think about. Like I made a post not too long ago on my own LinkedIn feed that parodied that, which was it started with, so what exactly do you do? And I said it would be easier if I said I'm a rocket scientist. I
Yeah.
make rockets.
Yes.
Like because people just would go, "Oh, that's so cool," and they don't care about
Yeah.
how to make a rocket.
Yeah.
But right, and when you talk about like human experiences and emotional topics, then they want to know, "Oh, how do you do that? But what is that? What does that mean?" And then I go, well, I would have to teach you five different subject matters that I've learned over 20 years for you to like truly grasp
Mhm.
what I'm talking about at the fundamental level, as opposed to me telling you why I do it and you saying, oh, okay, I get that. Like a doctor, like, or like, I'm here to save your life. Okay, great. Do
Yeah.
it. I'm not going to ask you how you're going to do that. Just do it.
Yeah.
you know? And, but in our case, it's interesting. It's so interesting, Cheryl. Like you do as a creative, everyone wants to know how. It's like, how do you do that? What are you actually doing? What am I actually getting?
Yeah.
And you go, again, it's a question of vocabulary. I could sit here and list it literally, and I do. I've done this so many times. I list it, and they go, "Yeah, but what does that mean?" I'm like, "I'm telling you, look, like,
Nope. I know.
do you want me to give you five books to read? Because that's what I'm talking about. In my case, culture branding, the way that I've curated it is basically it's design thinking, organizational psychology, communication strategy, brand strategy, um, graphic design,
Mhm.
and there's, I mean, honestly just keeps going. But basically, it's like those five things culminating into what is culture branding, because you're talking about if branding is an emotional contract where every single touch point, every single one, from the
Yes.
moment you like walk into an office and smell the office, that's an emotional contract. That's a touch point.
Mhm.
And it shows people that you are a certain kind of place and they now feel a certain kind of thing because they smelled a certain kind of smell and they feel a certain kind of temperature and they see a certain kind of light. Like all of these things matter and they relate to psychology, they relate to behavioral science, they relate to aesthetics, they relate to industrial design, spatial curation. Like it's just endless. So that one tiny second of you walking into the through a doorway
Yeah.
is a culmination of all these fields, and they're going, well, what do we get out of that? And I'm
I
like,
know.
a place no one will ever want to leave and they'll want to spend a lot of money to be at.
Yeah. And see, as soon as you said that, it's like, okay, I'm bought in. But all this other stuff, and I think this is one thing I really like about podcasts, and I think this is a great place to kind of summarize it all, is as we talk about all this in a conversational way and we share our stories and we share things, then we're communicating our message in a longer form where people can say, okay, now we can dig into the weeds a little bit. But man, when you're trying to sell it and you're just trying to get out there, it is just, you have to, this is why, because you will have customers who will want to be part of your organization for a long time to come, and they will pay good money. And
Yeah.
the rest of it, they don't care how you do it.
Yeah.
Just bring me the customers, make sure they're repeat customers and they pay a lot of money and you're hired.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, it's just, it's such a challenge, to really get, and it's 100% a communication problem every single time. It's just communications and it's not trivial. How do you say something that the people you want to understand will understand?
Mhm.
And it's just not trivial. Some people will tell you in a B2B space, they're like, talk about the money. You have to talk about the money. It's the tangibles. What is the bottom line? What are you getting out of this? What problems are you solving? On the other hand, where B2B fails, in my opinion, is that it doesn't adopt from B2C enough. B2C is very successful in brand strategy. It's the most successful because they focus on emotional connection. They
Yes.
focus on emotional resonance and storytelling, and they highlight the experiences people will have because they tap into a much deeper truth than just saving money or making money. They tap into purpose and existential subject matters, and like off the top of your head, Patagonia, Virgin, Harley Davidson, Nike, it keeps going. And even if just, and so like you see yourself in these stories and they speak to the adventurer, the athlete, the explorer, the whatever. And B2B is lackluster there. It's lacking in that capacity. And I think it's a place where a lot of my own colleagues talk about. They're like, there has to be a way to get into that. And I say there is. You just have to ask the right questions. Ask the same questions. How does working for this place or buying from this place make you feel? Like, how is your life improving because you're a customer of this organization as a business? How is your business improving? And then dig into the emotional components of that as the buyer, because the business is not buying your services. A human is.
Yes.
A person is buying your services. You're speaking to a buyer. You're not even speaking to the decision maker. You're speaking to the buyer who's going to influence the decision maker into saying, "Okay, where do I sign?" Right? And that's an emotional contract.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny. Sorry, my looked away because my dog just fell off of
The
her
dog.
3-inch pillow. She's got a 3-inch pillow and she just fell off of it. And I'm like, how can you fall off a
Because
3-inch
she's
pillow?
4 inches.
Yeah, that's you got it. And she's also 13 and struggles. That's why we
Oh
didn't.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's what business to business forgets is ultimately in the end, business to business exists to serve business to consumer. There's always a
Yes.
consumer at
Yeah,
the end.
that's right.
And so that
100%.
business to business is just the middleman kind of. So you've got to, we need to bring all of that culture and that branding and identity and all those things we talked about into that place and that space so that everybody's happy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an emotional component every single time. Function only lasts for so long. The allure of anything functional is finite. It's the experiences that we care for and remember and want to repeat. You
Yes.
know, there there's an expiration date on everything, including us. And
Yes.
so what we care for the most are fundamentals. It's actually universal truths. It's connection with other people. It's connection with ourselves. It's, family time. It's friends. It's adventure, living life to the fullest, whatever that means for anyone. And that's where brand strategy kicks in and design thinking kicks in because you empathize with who the end user is, who's the end person here. So let's go figure out what motivates them.
Yep.
And then they'll say it's money, and I'm like, well, but why? Like, what do they do with the
With that
money?
money. Exactly. Money is only as good as what it can buy.
Yeah,
So, well, anyway, thank you so
that's it.
much for
Yeah.
taking your time today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. This was really fun. I really appreciate the time as well. Thank you for inviting me. Seriously.
Well, let everybody know what your contact, social media, all that good stuff, however it is you want to communicate.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually really easy to find. I mean, if you Google me, you'll find me, just Nader Safinia, but I'm also very active on LinkedIn, just Nader Safinia. And feel free to visit the website, blackribbit.com. to check out our work and even check out my podcast.
Right.
So, where we talk about culture branding in the modern workplace.
Sounds good. And I'll put all that in the show notes so that it's easily accessible. So thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks, Cheryl.
Bye. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating to help others discover this valuable content. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps us continue creating engaging episodes for our listeners.